that down in the editing room.
Marcus, be a pal. Give us 4 or 5 minutes. We're going to have a cup of coffee.
In an
That idea, Professor Jones, is a very important
I can understand why he wanted that stuff gone, because if it stayed in the film, Marion's line of would no longer have an interpretation that could be argued. Rather, in concert with this excised material within these co-ed dalliance, it would mean literally what Marion stated.
You knew what you were doing.
Given how this film begins for Indy's present situation, I have expected him to get to his lecture hall and make advances on some young thing to avoid the fact that his life is in shambles.
You don't recognize me, do you?
Mangle, if you're really going to set us up this way, don't just push that envelope, stamp it and mail it by bringing some of those troublesome elements out of mothballs and make them uncomfortably relevant for all of us. Honestly, though, this establishing sequence for the character and the series reeks of contrivance. Let's ignore the happy marriage to the love of his life that ended the previous film. Now, we need Indiana Jones at the bottom of the barrel when this begins, because, well, we just do. Whether it's Han Solo magically back to being a deadbeat Skywalker hiding from the universe, or Jean-Luc Picard, a galactic pariah, or James Bond jaded to the point that you wonder why he even goes to work anymore. The only thing that is clear is modern filmmakers don't want to work with the situations they inherit with franchises. They want to impose their own ideas on the material without earning it. And by that I mean without being creative enough to take Indiana Jones to a place of frustration and sadness within their own story organically. We're expected to take these auteurs' creative choices within these franchises at face value, but unfortunately that's something Indiana Jones himself expressly warned us against doing.
Can it afford to take mythology at face value?
Before we leave Dr. Jones' apartment, I gotta ask why we're in a dingy apartment in the middle of New York City at all. This is 1969, the beginning of white flight from American urban centers, and we're supposed to believe that Dr. Henry Jones, renowned professor of archaeology at Marshall College with a very nice home in suburban Connecticut, would move here? This smells of another example of the filmmakers rearranging the game pieces on the board without suitable explanation, so they can put their story exactly where they want it without any heavy lifting on their part. Why couldn't Dr. Jones have been visiting New York during this sequence as a guest archaeology lecturer at the inner city college? That would have still put him there for the Apollo 11 ticker tape parade and the horse chase the filmmakers clearly wanted him involved in minutes from now. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, and we can't ride past the introduction of the character that has become the lightning rod for most of the online takedowns of this film. So we'd better get to class, though it isn't the classroom we remember. In Winds of the Lost Ark, he was at Marshall College. In Last Crusade, he was at Barnett College, even though the classroom and outer hallway were identical. Marcus miraculously worked there in the same capacity as well. Why they bothered to change the name of the college in that film defies explanation. In Crystal Skull, he was back at Marshall College, though now in a slightly different classroom in another part of the campus, with Marcus having passed away some years prior. Now he's at the sad, drab confines of Hunter College, and he's giving a lecture about the plot of the movie. This is really the final chess move in the evolution of the plotting of an Indiana Jones film. Originally, the opening adventure and his classroom lecture had nothing to do with the main quest in the movie. In Raiders, he searched for a Peruvian golden idol before giving a lecture about the Turkane Barrow in Hazelwood. The only connection to the main plot being the introduction of Renee Belloc and establishing him as one of Indy's most troublesome rivals. In Temple of Doom, he was trying to get a large diamond from Lao Che in exchange for Apache. Some people have tried to blame this diamond as the Eye of the Peacock, which was the focus of a few episodes of the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles. But that's a retcon that we shouldn't waste time on here. Regardless, it has no relationship with Indy's main thrust of the film, or the appropriateness of power styles. In Last Crusade, the lines begin to flow. His opening adventure in childhood's return across Colorado gives a glimpse of his father working on his rail tower, which will become a major plot point in the rest of the film. film. Before the opening concludes, Indy is now an adult and has recovered the cross. While giving a lecture that appears to have started on the subject of mescaline and violence, he is able to hand off the cross to Marcus before both of them are pulled into the search for the Holy Grail. In Crystal Skull, the opening adventure is, for the first time, directly related to the main plot of the film, as Russian infiltrators force Indy to help them locate an alien corpse in the Area 51 warehouse, which leads directly to the entire alien plot of the film. However, the classical lecture concerns Skara Brae, the Olympic settlement in Scotland. In Dial of Destiny, the filmmakers seem committed to cramming that dial down their throats. The opening adventure, initially said to be regarding the Holy Lance, which, funnily enough, is often referred to as the Spear of Destiny, quickly changes gears to focus on the Anti-Kythera, nicknamed the Dial of Destiny by the screenwriters. So now, like Crystal Skull, the opening adventure is the beginning of the film's main quest, except this time in the classroom, Indy is giving a lecture on the siege of Syracuse and the fabled defenses of the city created by Archimedes. It is during this lecture, filled with bored students who care more about the parade about to take place in the streets below to celebrate the return of the Apollo 11 astronauts, that Dr. Jones is trying with passion and exuberance to get his audience interested in the siege, but no one will take the bait, except a random stranger in the back row. This is our introduction to Helena Shaw, played by Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Before we get on the subject of Shaw, let's take note of the fact that her answers to Indy's questions, which his own students don't give a crap in paying attention to, are once again about the Dial of Destiny. Indy asks the class how archaeology might prove that Archimedes was able to create such advanced defensive weapons for the city since no evidence survives outside of the folklore. Shaw confidently exclaims,
The Anti-Kythera.
for the first and only time in the history of the Indiana Jones series, the opening adventure and the classroom lecture are directly connected to the main quest of the film. While Mangold said he wanted this movie to feel like Raiders of the Lost Ark again, another complete miss. I can't help but feel like the filmmakers did this because they knew their quest object was relatively esoteric and uninteresting, and required more explanation than previous stories. I would argue Kingdom of the Crystal Skull didn't know how to explain the quest object of its own story, so any and every explanation in the film felt insufficient.
The skeleton was pure.
But in Dial of Destiny, we have a different problem. We have the story of an artifact the general audience won't be terribly familiar with, that will have layers and layers of fictionalized power even on the screen. And then the same screenwriters try to convince us that Indy is totally fixated on it. And how do they do that? By having Helena Shaw appear in his classroom looking for the Dial of Destiny, coincidentally on the same day Dr. Jones was giving a lecture about the events that, according to the film, prompted the creation of the Anti-Kythera in the first place. See why him being a guest lecturer might have made this more incredible, because then Helena Shaw could have read that Indiana Jones was giving a lecture about the siege of Syracuse at Hunter College and made sure she was there that day to talk to him about the Dial of Destiny. To make matters worse, the artifact in question that the film's story is based around isn't the actual object of their quest. As we will see later in the film, Indy and Helena Shaw discuss the historical Anti-Kythera separately in a few throwaway lines before getting back to their very fictional Dial of Destiny, which they also refer to as the Anti-Kythera.
In 1956, Wolfenstein has been a wrecked Roman warship.
Going way up high. Look out!
So in the universe of Indiana Jones, there are two Anti-Kythera devices. The actual one found by archaeologists in a 2,000-year-old shipwreck off the coast of Greece in 1901, and now this second one, which also has the nickname Dial of Destiny. That would be like having Raiders of the Lost Ark's characters discuss the Ark of the Covenant before then saying, but the Ark we're looking for is the other Ark of the Covenant. What made the original Indiana Jones quest object so compelling is the fact that they possibly actually existed at one time, had been lost, and nobody had ever found their final resting places. In this case, the writers picked an artifact that, while somewhat intellectually mysterious, has already been found and well documented, and tossed it to the side in favor of their totally made-up quest object. However, in pulp adventure stories, made-up artifacts are never as interesting for the audience. Even if the viewer isn't a history buff, the magic of pulp adventure stories comes from the wonder of possibility. When the audience sees a story so fun and effective in conveying the slimmest chance that such a magical object might once have existed in our real world, it makes the story come alive for the viewer in a way other genres often cannot. All of that hangs on a focus around something from humanity's collective folklore being the main plot point. If you just make it up, you lose that entire storytelling advantage. Throw the magic away, because magic hinges on people believing it might be real. That's why the first Tomb Raider game about the search for Atlantis is a more effective adventure story than Tomb Raider 2, which is about a magic Chinese dagger that can turn the user into a dragon. We all know the story of Atlantis from humanity's ancient surviving folklore. Meanwhile, a totally made-up magic dagger is a whatever quest object for the average viewer, just a cheap device to hang an action story on. One tale holds real magic for the audience beyond the movie, while the other only has magic because the film says it does. The exact same thing happened with the Tomb Raider films 20 years ago, if you recall. One film was rooted in our collective mythology about a legendary ancient vessel that if found and opened could pose grave danger for all of humanity. The other film was about a completely made-up ancient object. This object's alleged power was that it allowed the user to control time. The object was split into two halves and lost. Does that sound familiar?
He's going for it.
That's the plot of Dial of Destiny. Let me show you how much more effective it is in a pulp adventure story to base your screenplay around a historical legend rather than fictional one.
I think that they were very close to the culture.
He'll head to the ring.
But the intelligence.
Lara, these men are from MI6.
Yes, I can tell.
European sections intercepted. German
Are you feeling a little bit of high risk? Oh my God! Oh,
Let's
look
go
at
rest of this
what
little
a
start.
reckless attack off the top rope, putting it all on the line.
Yeah, that hardly the chest that he was used to carry around with him.
Pharaoh opened the box, but all that was left inside was a rope.
That's it. Pack your bags.
That's the Sunday school version.
However, an Egyptian pharaoh, Shishak, yes, invaded the city of Jerusalem around about 980 BC.
2300 BC, an Egyptian pharaoh found a place to him.
And he may have taken the artifact
And he sends him
to
into the
Tanis.
corner.
Pharaoh's son dispatched his finest soldiers
Nice
to take the
agility.
box and transport it to the end of the world.
And hidden it in a secret chamber from a well of stone.
Methodically beating their opponent down in the corner.
It has never been seen since.
What do they have planned here? Out to the apron. Gonna climb up to the top rope now. Are you kidding me? Coast to coast. Wow. Meet him at the pay window.
The head and staff of rock. Catherine Scott. And if you put the staff in a certain place, a certain time of day,
He's heading up top. Thinking big. Measuring it up one more time. Five-star frog splash. Going to the well again. Will it produce dividends? Yes, we have a new champion.
You may be thinking to yourself right now, wow, Tomb Raider 2 ripped off the plot of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Well, guess what? Indiana Jones 5 just ripped off the plot of Tomb Raider 1. I'd much rather be a mediocre film series ripping off of a good film series than a film